So welcome everyone to our Thursday evening talk. And today I won't spend any further time introducing meditation because I think it's something which everyone following here in person in Woking is already fairly familiar with. So today we'll sit for meditation for about 45 minutes, and after that then I'll move on with the topic of the Dhamma talk today, which will be on mastering your craft, which is the 8th blessing from the Mangala Sutta. So if you'd like to make yourself comfortable for some meditation now. So we start by closing our eyes very gently, breathing deeply to ourselves for 2 or 3 breaths, and making sure our eyes are closed very gently. From there we do what's known as a body scan, which means scanning down through the whole of our body, relaxing each and every muscle as we go. So from our forehead, we relax any tension there, and we make sure our eyebrows and our eyelids are relaxed. The way we close our eyes is really only with our upper and lower eyelashes touching lightly together. And we allow the muscles of our face to become soft, relaxing our jaw, taking care not to clench our teeth together. And then moving on down, we relax our neck and let our shoulders drop to their natural height. Relaxing our arms, our forearms, and then our hands and fingers. So that even the way our hands rest in our lap is as light and gentle as possible. Moving on down, we relax all the muscles of our torso, chest, trunk and abdomen. Relaxing both legs, all the way down to our feet and our toes. Until we feel satisfied that no remaining part of our body has any sort of stress or tension anymore. There may be places in your body where tension still lingers on, in which case you do your best to relax them as far as possible. And this allows us to forget about our body, turning our attention instead to the feeling inside us. That sense of warmth and well-being within. Something which by any other name you could call your state of mind. And even our state of mind needs to be relaxed as far as possible, to set the scene for the meditation ahead. The way to relax the mind is to let go for a few moments of all the worries and concerns from any aspect of your life, any regrets from your past, or any plans for the future. But remaining in the here and now, while conjuring up a sense of happiness and joy in the mind, as if happiness and joy were like tiny particles growing and spreading within yourself, while chasing away any residual stresses and strains from the space of your mind. And at a certain point when we feel comfortable with ourselves, we can imagine our whole body to be nothing but an empty space or a hollow cavity, with no organs or tissues, muscles or bones. Alternatively, you might imagine your body to be like a transparent bubble with nothing on the inside. But at this point you can remember back once again to the picture of the sun shining, or perhaps a full moon, a star, or a diamond, or perhaps an object that you can feel rather than see. All you need to do is conjure it up in your mind, and it may be that the object is clear to you, or it may be that it's vague. But for our purposes, it doesn't really matter. We just work with what we have. We allow that inner object to float the deepest point of the breath. If our awareness wanders away anywhere else, then we're just going to bring it back again to this point. And if the inner object disappears, we can think of a new one. If the mind is free of thought, then we allow it to remain that way. But if thoughts are still numerous in the mind, then we can make use of that silent mantra by hearing the sound of the words Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, coming up as if from the same point at the center of our diaphragm. The two things hand in hand, the inner object and the sound of the mantra, will gradually lead the mind deeper at the center, freeing the mind of unwanted thoughts to the point that nothing but a sense of stillness remains. We cultivate our mind on track in this way just for a few more moments in silence, each to our own practice until we come to the appropriate time. continue to keep our mind on track with the inner nature of ourselves by keeping the mind in place at the center of the body by means of our inner object, and then mantra too if necessary to keep the mind free of thought in order to return to our true nature, in order to give our mind some distance from the technological lives that we tend to live from day to day. So although technology has transformed our lives, which superficially may seem so beneficial, sometimes lasting happiness is hard to find. No matter how fast technology progresses, but it never seems to catch up with all the problems that we experience. And some people may be left wondering whether there's more to life than mere technological prowess. Whether what we have is real happiness, or whether it's just the postponement of further suffering. Often with technology, it's as if we've forgotten something. It's as if we've forgotten a point of balance within ourselves, where we know we're after something, but we're not quite sure what we're looking for. We only know that if we can find it, then it would be blissful. And we suspect that meditation is something of what we've been missing that might provide answers for our quest. And in fact, we wouldn't be far wrong, because the point of balance inside us is part of our natural birthright. Our natural birthright. Those who know how to balance themselves on the inside will be more resilient in the face of social pressures and can live a life of happiness in spite of them. In society, we often feel worn down by problems that seem to get in the way of our happiness. But there's no need for us to play the victim, because each of us has a potential in us to find a balance free from all these problems. But if the power of our mind is still insufficient, then it will leave us vulnerable to the stresses and strains imposed on us. The power of the mind is concerned with everything we do 24 hours a day. To perform any task successfully takes concentration, encouragement, memory, awareness, and an understanding of those around us. And if our mind lacks the ability to center, then happiness cannot stay with us for very long. Rather like rain, which drop by drop splashes and scatters over the land. Each drop alone has no intrinsic value and soon disappears. In the same way, if the power of the untrained mind is scattered and divided by 1,000 personal complexities, it has no momentum and is vulnerable to unsatiated consumption, a lack of true friendship, and despair in the face of problems. The very things that are at the root of discontent in society. With meditation, what we are exploring is what can happen if the power of the mind is withdrawn from 1,000 concerns into a unified focus. Rather like the rainwater, it can come together as rivulets and streams, gathering momentum and power, until as the torrent of a mighty river, it can generate enough power to fulfill our need for meaning in life. And at some point we'll start to realize that we have a new sense of intuition in understanding ourselves. We find it easier to make our journey towards higher knowledge, and we can start to explore the frontiers of inner space. Because our knowledge of the world goes hand in hand with what we can see of the world. In the darkness of the night, when the sun's rays cannot penetrate, it's hard to discover or explore things beyond our understanding. In the same way, although our mind may be powerful, we cannot explore the mind that's still in darkness. But at the dawning of the day, when the sun illuminates the world for us to see, we can truly say we know the world. But although the rays of the sun are bright, they cannot shed light into the inner world of the mind. The illumination that the mind needs is the light of the mind itself. Illumination that comes from the mind's natural point of balance at the center of the body. It's an illumination that arises from the power of the mind that has become focused in stillness at the center of the body. And because balance of mind brings brightness and the power of unification, it is also the source of knowledge and happiness, which we need to keep up with the sophistication of the stresses and strains of the world around us. Meditation is a legacy passed down to us from the wisdom of the ancients. It harnesses the unification of nature in the power of our mind, the river's torrents, the brightness of the sun, and a cool stillness. All we need to do is to close our eyes, feel at ease, and bring the mind to a point of balance at the center of the body, as if we were returning to find the true nature of ourselves, with all the time in the world. So we leave behind all the tensions and concerns about the things of the world, finding a point of focus at the most peaceful point at the center of our body, maintaining the mind there at its point of balance. And whatever we're doing, training the mind not to drift out of harmony with the center of our body, until the focus of the mind becomes more and more unified at the center of ourselves, bright and clear, harnessing the natural brightness of the mind, which will allow us to glimpse at the unending happiness that comes from the balance, without succumbing to the pressures of consumerism, suspicion, fragmentation, or problems, but keeping only benevolence and compassionate understanding. Meditation in stillness and unity can bring together the natural brilliance of the mind at its point of balance. It gives rise to a penetrating knowledge to understand ourselves in relation to the root problems of society. So meditation alone or together, even for only 20 minutes a day, allows us to explore and understand ourselves and the mind uncluttered by the influences of the modern world, allowing us to return to a point of harmony and balance with nature. Balance that is a happiness which is beyond words and also beyond doubt. And once we've seen that point of balance within ourselves, the happiness we've attained will spread to those around us in society, eventually to all the countries of the world. So now for a few more moments in silence, we keep our mind focused gently at the center of ourselves, with the inner object of our choice. Whether it's something that we can see or something we can feel, each to our own practice, for a few more moments in silence until we come to the appropriate time. Forget if your mind wanders away onto other things. Each time you realize, simply bring your attention back again to the center of the body as before. Bring it back for as many times as it takes to become established, to form a connection in a way that you can actually feel the connection at the center. If the thoughts return, do your best to ignore them, or make use of the mantra if ignoring them isn't working. And always double check to make sure you're using only the very lightest of touch in the way you apply your mind at the center. We continue to keep our awareness at the center of our body the whole of the time, always at the center of whatever inner experience we've built up for ourselves as a result of the meditation so far this evening. For some people, that inner experience will take the form of a sense of inner brightness around the center of the body. And if we touch very gently with our awareness at the center of that brightness, then the brightness will expand outwards from the central point. Much the same way that solid becomes liquid, or liquid becomes vapor, the point of contact with something warm. For others it may be a sense of well-being, in which case the touch at the center of that feeling will expand that sense of well-being outwards from the central point. For others it may be inner images, large or small like objects, or large like whole vistas or panoramas, where we're actually smaller than the objects we perceive inside ourselves. But allowing that inner experience to expand outwards from that central point is known as the process of spreading loving kindness. It's known as an antidote for any anger that we might find within ourselves. It also spreads like a soothing tide outwards into the world around us, to quench any anger, any fragmentation, any conflicts in the world around us. The spreading of loving kindness is of benefit both to ourselves and to others. It's like giving back something of the benefits of our own meditation to improve the world around us. But traditionally, meditation on loving kindness always starts with ourselves. Starts with the intention that we be well and happy and free from all suffering. So we extend that intention to ourselves first of all, by expanding the inner experience to fill the whole of our own body, extending that good intention to the whole of ourselves, for allowing it to extend outwards beyond the boundaries of our own body, out into the room around us, in all directions all around, like an aura or like a halo, extending outwards to the whole building in which we are situated, extending that loving kindness to all the sentient beings that share the building with us, and reaching out to them again with the intention that all those living beings be well and happy, free from suffering, live together in peace and harmony. Extending our loving kindness wider still outwards to the whole neighborhood, in all directions, all around, all the people, all the sentient beings therein. Wishing that they too can pick up on a sense of loving kindness, that they may be free from suffering, live together in peace and harmony. Wider to the whole city, whole county, neighboring counties, outwards to the whole country, neighboring countries, and the whole of the continent, extending our loving kindness as if across a map, seen in bird's eye view, to all the people, all the sentient beings therein, with the wish that they be well and happy, free from suffering, live together in peace and harmony. Further still to all the continents of the world, extending our loving kindness across the entire face of this planet. The intention that all living beings, whether on the land, in the air, or in the sea, be touched by our loving kindness, that they too may be well and happy, free from suffering, live together in peace and harmony. That true peace might become a reality within our own lifetimes. We can extend our loving kindness further still outwards into the universe around us, to the front and the back, to the right and the left, above and below, limitlessly outwards into the universe, to wherever there are living beings, wishing that they also be well and happy, free from suffering, live together in peace and harmony. And for the final few moments of our meditation, we can also extend our loving kindness even across the boundaries of space and time to reach loved ones of ours who may no longer be with us. But who, through the purity of our intention, we can reach out to with our loving kindness, and our intention that they be well and happy, free from suffering, live together in peace and harmony. Extend our loving kindness in this way for the last few moments of our practice in silence until we come to the appropriate time. Sapphe Buddha Palapata Pace Kanancha Yampalang Arahantanancha Te Jenara Bandami Sappaso Sappa Buddhanupavena Sappa Dhammanupavena Sappa Sanghanupavena Sattha Soti Bhavantu Te. So if you'd like to come to the end of your meditation for this evening, you can gradually open your eyes again. If you feel at all uncomfortable, then slowly try changing to a more comfortable position before gradually finishing your practice. Hopefully you feel well rested after your meditation. I don't know whether you need to rest further, take a short break before we continue. Not particularly. So, if I may, I will continue with the subject for today, which is a continuation of the blessings of life, which I've been talking about over the last few weeks. In fact, it was 2 weeks ago that I finished off blessing number 7, which was about learnedness, which was basically talking about the value of having heard a lot of teachings, but the teachings in theoretical form. And although it's always an advantage to have a lot of knowledge up your sleeve, better still than that, and the next rung of the ladder, according to the blessings of life, is to be able to take that knowledge and apply it skillfully for good in society. Hence this idea of craftsmanship or mastering your craft. And it is not the same as academic or theoretical knowledge, but it's more what comes of having put that knowledge into practice to bring benefit for others in some way, in some skillful way. Because many people, if they're fresh out of school and enthusiastically looking for some sort of employment, are instantly disappointed when no one is really very interested in them unless they have experience on their curriculum vitae. And the reason for that is that all the theory is great, but unless you've actually put it to some use, then generally that person lacks something as a potential member of the team. And this is really what comes of mastering the 8th blessing. In the same, by the same token, if you have read a lot of theory about Buddhism, that's great. I'm not saying that it's not useful, but unless you actually get down and practice it, then it becomes of no real transformational value to you. It's like a person who reads a manual of swimming, which has never seen a swimming pool before, leaves the book on the side of the pool eventually, and then jumps in, disappearing without trace. So, theory is great, but it's not quite the whole story, and this is why we need to examine it and see the value of it. Otherwise, we end up with a prestigious degree, but find that we don't get a prestigious job to match it. So, any sort of practical experience, although some people don't like to get their hands dirty, but it's something which is very valuable to have, even before one graduates in many cases, to have that practical applied experience. And it's really what employers are looking for. You need to be the sort of person who they send out scouts to track you down even before you finish your degree. That would be the ideal thing. So, Some teachers think they are pretty good at their subject because they know all the theory, but often their teachers have a disparaging saying that goes with them, that those who can do, but those who can't teach. Because many of them can teach other people to do a perfectly good job, but for themselves, all they know is how to communicate the theory to those students of theirs. So, definitions of craftsmanship or mastering your craft, really it comes from a Pali word called sippang, which literally means artistry or having an art, being gifted in something. So it is being able to apply that knowledge fruitfully. The sort of features where that artistry can be considered a blessing would be that firstly it should be something that's fairly refined and wholesome, leads to an upgrading of the quality of the mind. You can imagine that probably picking people's pockets is quite a craft, but it wouldn't be considered a blessing because it doesn't uplift the quality of the mind. Secondly, it needs to add quality or value to the raw materials. And I can't remember how I came across the book, but I once read a book about Maori values, so like sort of New Zealand and natives, and they make canoes out of trees, basically, hollow out the middle. But they think long and hard before they make a canoe, because really, if they didn't have to cut down the tree, it would be very beautiful already as these huge trees growing in New Zealand. So to actually justify cutting down the tree to make a canoe, the canoe has to be more beautiful than the tree they cut down. That's the sort of thinking that would go behind craftsmanship. And the same sort of thing would probably go into, if you get really fine ingredients in your kitchen, you wouldn't want to waste them on someone who doesn't know how to cook. It'd be a waste of the ingredients. It's the same sort of thinking. So what would be the level of craftsmanship to really upgrade and make the most of those ingredients which you have managed to lay your hands on? It should lead to creative rather than aggressive or destructive thinking. A motor engineer can build engines to help people in their daily lives, or they can build weapons to wage war. It's the same skill set, but the one that is a blessing would lead to people's benefit in life, not to destruction. Should not lead to sensual obsession. A lot of art, fine art, if you walk around any art gallery, you can see a lot of finesse has gone into it. So it would get number one there. But if it leads to sensual obsession, then it wouldn't be considered a blessing. I once had the unfortunate experience to follow my monastic teacher around an art gallery, and he just walked out of some of the the nude sections, basically. And I thought, but this is art, they put a lot of effort in here. And he just said, fails on number 4, basically. Because the people who look at it come away with a different sort of way of thinking that is not necessarily one which is uplifting for the mind. Shouldn't lead to vengefulness in the same way. So, let's say coming up with propaganda slogans, skillful maybe, but not uplifting ultimately. And it should not lead to delusion, supporting superstition, or making people gullible, or propagating disinformation. Number 6. It's not only manual skills that qualify for the fulfillment of this 8th blessing, but also through this channel of speech or the mind, creative thinking, that sort of thing, also would be considered as skills which can be mastered as well. And it can be simple things, and not necessarily sort of sophisticated things. Plumbing, mechanics, painting, design, sculpture, photography, printing, gardener, farmer, author, nurse. Having good manners, being polite, dressing appropriately, being hospitable, all of these lead people to behave in a cultivated way. Verbal skills, communication skills, we will look at them a little bit further down the line in blessing number 10, specifically communication skills. And some people make their living quite well by the fact that they are able to think creatively, think outside the box. So it can be expressed through body, speech, or mind. So let's say you have theory. You've got all the theory in your head. You've got the makings of a skill. How can you turn that into real craftsmanship? And there is a theory that it takes a lot of repetition and familiarity with a skill to turn it into real mastery. And in the old days, there used to be something known as the 10,000 hour rule, that if you put 10,000 hours into any sort of practice of a skill, then you can become an expert in it. So this is like a very simplistic way of looking at it. But there are some case histories of this working for certain quite high-profile people. It comes from the Canadian journalist Malcolm Gladwell, who wrote a book in 2008 called Outliers, where he said that all you need is 10,000 hours and you can become a world leader in any given field, alongside the usual requirements of opportunity and a certain degree of privilege in life. But he gave examples in his book of the 10,000 hour phenomenon for musicians and athletes and entrepreneurs. So you may know Bill Gates already, but maybe you don't know Bill Joy. Bill Joy? Well, he's the bottom left there. Apparently he's known as Edison of the internet because he's one of the most influential people in computing history. He was lucky enough that at his University of Michigan, the computer center was left open all night for the students to use. So he started programming for 8 to 10 hours a day outside of his normal study hours. So although he had a really high aptitude for maths, but he also was lucky enough to have the chance to get in 10,000 hours of programming practice, usually at night when the computer center was open but no one else was using it. So yes, he was fairly talented to start off with, but because he put in a lot of effort to get up his programming skills, 10,000 hours of practice meant that he was, by his third year at Berkeley, he was up to the task of rewriting Unix source code. So that led to, I think, Java language. Yeah. Another example, this time bottom right there, Berlin's elite Academy of Music. Violinists were divided into 3 groups in a sort of experiment. So what was the difference between the violinists who went on to become world-class soloists, then difference between them and the ones who are merely judged as good, or the ones who are unlikely ever to play professionally? And they're asked a simple question: since you first picked up a violin, how many hours have you practiced? And by the age of 20, the elite students had amassed 10,000 hours, so magic number again. The good students had got up to 8,000 hours, and the future music teachers had only got 4,000 hours. Top left, you recognize them, right? Okay. They started out as a fairly mediocre garage band, okay, somewhere in Liverpool, okay. However, the group had an experience in Hamburg where, before they ever got their big break, they were required to play 8 hours a night, 7 days a week. And they were no longer able only to do their best numbers. They had to learn a lot of covers, and being foreign, they had to put more energy into their routines to come across effectively. But between 1960 and 1962, they played for a total of 270 nights in Hamburg, and they went out pretty average, but they came back uniquely excellent, and no one else sounded like them. They had a total of 1,200 live performances by that time, a figure which most professional bands would struggle to achieve in the course of their entire careers. So from the Beatles' Hamburg experience, a particular promoter from Germany was in London scouting for bands, and the guy met a guy from Liverpool who knew the Beatles, and they just randomly in a bar in Soho, and it was this connection that propelled them to the next stage in their fame. So that's how they got their 10,000 hours. Last but not least, top right, Bill Gates himself. Sometimes his story is told as a story of individual grit. Actually, he started out as someone writing software, payroll software, and he took advantage there where most people would see that as like a dead-end job. He saw it as an opportunity. And he happened to live within walking distance of Washington State University, where there was, again, free computer time between 3 and 6 a.m. in the morning. So he took advantage of that too, a little bit like Bill Joy, and he practiced programming. By the time he dropped out of Harvard, he was way past his 10,000 hours of programming experience. So what connects these quite disparate fields of craftsmanship? Bill Joy, Bill Gates, the Berlin elite violinists, and the Beatles is not really their extraordinary talent per se, but more their effort. And though in all cases they had both talent and a lot of effort put in. So 10,000 hours, it would seem to be the rule rather than the exception for these people who seem to make it to a world recognition. Although I will say, for those who are up on their management skills, that since the Malcolm Gladwell book was written, it must be admitted that there have been some detractors to this 10,000-hour theory. For example, the caveats that practice has to be deliberate, focused practice with experts on hand in order to make the 10,000 hours really work for a person. It's also been pointed out that emotions play a lot of a role in to make a difference to that learning experience as well, to make the 10,000 hours count. Unless the idea that practice makes perfect continues to hold water, not just for skills in general, but for meditation too. And it said that if you want to master any skill within a 5.5-year period, then you need to make sure you practice for 44 weeks of the year, 5 days a week, for 8 hours a day. And I suppose this is what is known as professionalism. So, a story for today. So before we add to 10,000 hours in other ways, I'll tell you the story of a professor who was on a sea voyage. And he was a highly educated man with a long tail of letters after his name. But he didn't have that much experience of life. But he liked to show off his knowledge. And in the crew of the ship on which he was traveling, there was an illiterate, old sailor. And every evening the sailor would visit the cabin of the young professor to listen to him hold forth on many subjects. And he was very impressed with the learning of this young man. So one evening, as the sailor was about to leave the cabin, the professor called out to him, "Old man, have you ever studied geology?" And he said, "What's that? I've never heard of it." And he said, "Well, it's the science of the earth." And he said, "No, sir, I've never been to school or college. I've never studied anything." So the professor immediately said, "Oh, old man, you've wasted a quarter of your life." So with a long face, the old sailor went away, and he thought, if a learned person like this professor says so, then it certainly must be true. And he thought, I've wasted a quarter of my life. So next evening, as the sailor was about to leave the cabin, the professor once again asked him a question. Old man, have you ever studied oceanography? And he said, well, what's that? And he says, it's the science of the sea. And he said, well, alas, I've never learned anything. I've never been to school. And the professor said, well, in that case, you've certainly wasted half your life. And hearing a learned person telling him about his life this way, he felt very disappointed in himself and the life that he had led. On the third night, the professor said, have you ever studied meteorology? And again, it's the sailor's turn to ask, I've never heard of this subject before, And he's explained that this is the science of the wind and of the rain and of the weather. And he said, well, I've never studied any of that. All I've done is been on a ship all my life. So the professor sort of summed up for him, you've not studied the science of the earth on which you live, you've not studied the science of the sea on which you earn your livelihood, you've not even studied the science of the weather which you encounter every day. Old man, you've certainly wasted 3/4 of your life. And the old sailor felt very unhappy about this. A learned man says, I've wasted my life, then it must certainly be true. But the next day it was the turn of the sailor to ask the professor a question. And he came running into the cabin of the young man. He said, Professor, have you ever studied swimology? And he said, Swimology? What do you mean by that? Can you swim, sir? No, I don't know how to swim. Professor, this ship has struck a rock and is sinking. Those who can swim will reach the nearby shore, but those who cannot swim will drown. I'm sorry, Professor, but you have certainly lost the whole of your life. So you may study all the ologies of the world, but if you don't learn swimology, then all your studies are useless. You may read and write books on swimming, you may debate its subtle theoretical subtleties, but you will not be able to help yourself if you refuse to enter the water. So being able to master the applied art of swimming will certainly be more of a blessing to you than the combined knowledge of 3 academic disciplines if your ship goes belly up in the middle of the ocean. So for today, I think I will probably draw to a conclusion there, but I have a few announcements to make in terms of publicity. That we have our classes in person here in Woking, mostly every Tuesday and every Thursday between 7 and 8:30. Thursday evening is usually a little bit heavier on the Buddhist stuff and has a longer meditation time. Tuesday will be a little bit more of an entry-level meditation, half an hour plus a wisdom talk. We also have a meditation retreat coming up next month between the 18th and the 20th, running from Friday evening, Saturday, and finishing up on Sunday afternoon. Anyone who's interested in details of that can look up the link on themeditationsari.com, which is a little bit easier to remember than the last one I told you. And young men amongst you might be interested in a longer retreat, which is generally held by all the European branches together at an exotic location somewhere in Belgium normally, for a month in June, and sometimes that can be negotiated down to 2 weeks if you have limited time. Also, to encourage you to meditate at home, there's also an app for that, an app known as Mind Gem, which is available on iOS or on Android, and on that are a lot of audio tracks from various monks who speak good English in our tradition, which can lead you through meditation or explain the benefits of meditation. And there's a timer which you can set to meditate for half an hour, say, and hear guided meditation for 20 minutes of that with a sound at the end to bring you out of your meditation. apart from the in-person and app activities, there's also online meditations every Saturday still, known as DMEU. It's Europe-wide, held between 7 and 8 p.m. on the Saturdays, British time, and between 8 and 9 for those listening from continental Europe. And we also have online and in-person invoking meditations on the full moon day, the next one which will be on the 18th of March. So anyone who comes along for the meditation retreat can have 2 in 1. They can have a full moon meditation to start off the meditation on the Friday night of the meditation retreat. And the theme for next time will be building spiritual resilience. So we come to the end for today, but there is always the opportunity for any questions and answers, feedback or comments which anyone might like to share at this point. So may all of you be blessed with the ability to put all the knowledge and theory in your life into craftsmanship of the finest quality in every good thing that you wish for.